Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Jessie and today I'm wrapping up the books I read in January. Before I get started though, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to make finding my content just a tiny bit easier. January was a pretty good reading month for me. I read 12 books, which is quite a few, and my average rating was about 3.8 stars. I had a couple of 4 and 5 star books, but I did have a lot of 3.5 and 3 star books, which while those aren't bad ratings, they are lower than I would have liked. And they kind of signify that I didn't have a great reading month quality-wise. I think I'll be discussing the books from my favorites to my least favorites, and I will make sure I mention like any challenges that each book completed as I get to each book, because I am trying to go through a couple of reading challenges this year. My favorite book in January was The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochran. This book was a 5-star read, and I also read this as part of the Instagram challenge of reading 12 books recommended by 12 friends. This was my first 5-star read of this year and I absolutely loved it. This book follows Dave and Charlie. Dave is a producer on a Bachelor style show. He typically handles and works with the female contestants, or I guess on seasons where they have a bachelorette style, the female bachelorette. But this particular season, he for some reason gets tasked with being Charlie's handler. And Charlie just so happens to be the bachelor on this Bachelor style show. Charlie is kind of trying to repair his image. He used to work in tech, and then something happened, and now he's trying to just make himself look better so he can get hired again in the industry that he loves. Along the way, because this is a romance, Charlie and Dev develop feelings and kind of fall for each other, but the issue is that Charlie, as the bachelor on the show, is supposed to end up engaged to one of the female contestants by the time it's all over. And then, as a producer, Dave isn't really supposed to be romantically involved with Charlie. But this is a romance, so it's going to have a happily ever after. And so it's fun to go on the journey with them and see how they get there. This book had really great mental health representation as far as I can tell, based off of other people's thoughts and my own thoughts. Charlie has OCD and panic disorder, and so he has just incredibly high anxiety all the time. He's very insecure about it at times just because of how other people perceive him based off of his disorders and his mental health. While I don't have panic disorder or OCD, I have had issues with generalized anxiety. And so I can't really say for sure that Charlie's representation is 100% accurate, but based off of other people's reviews and what I know about my own experiences, I could see Charlie's representation of OCD and just anxiety disorders in general being pretty accurate and like a good representation. On the other hand, Dev, he has a lot of issues with depression, and I think I currently, at this point in my life, probably resonate more with Dev in the sense that I've had like depressive episodes more similar to Dev's. And so I almost like I'm putting too much out there, but also isn't that part of how you destigmatize mental health, is just by talking about it? But it does feel a little awkward talking about it. And so I do think overall both of their mental health issues that they faced were handled well. And I really liked that by the end of the book, there's a period of time where they both take the time to get a handle on their mental health in some way before they ultimately end up together. And so I really enjoyed this book. I had a great time with it, and I'm excited to reread it in the future. I also read Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston in January, and it was another 5-star read. And I read this as part of my challenge to read 22 books in 2022. And my particular challenge is to read 22 books I already own. I have a video where you can see the books I have on it, and also a highlight on my Instagram story to see, the other books on this list. This book follows Amari Peters. She's always kind of stuck out. She's almost always been, the poor Black scholarship student at like rich private schools that are mostly full of white students. And her brother's recently gone missing. No one seems to believe her and her mom that he's missing, that he wasn't involved in anything bad, because her mom and Amari can't really say where he worked. They don't know where he worked, and so the police and everyone involved are like, well, he's a Black kid who suddenly started making a lot of money. He must have been involved in something bad. And so Amari somehow ends up getting invited to this magical summer camp where she will get the tools to find her brother. And while she's there though, she's once again ostracized just for existing. The school is full of legacy kids, and on top of that, Amari just so happens to have an illegal ability. So while trying to, balance staying at the school, trying out for this junior agent position, and trying to find stuff to find her brother, it's just kind of a lot going on. I really enjoyed most of this book. I had a great time with it. I would say there's this level of predictability that you should expect whenever you are an adult reading a middle grade book. And so there were a few parts that were predictable, but they weren't bad. They didn't take me out of the story because that's just part of reading something that's not for my age. I'm not the target audience, but this was still a great read. I enjoyed the friendships Amari made whenever she found the right people who fit her and accept her. Like Elsie, I thought Elsie was an amazing friend, and I'm excited to see Elsie in subsequent books. I actually really appreciated the twist at the end of this book, and I was really excited by it, and it was really interesting. And I'm excited to see where the next book goes. I'm excited that in the next book, we'll hopefully get to see more of the magic in the world, because the magic is kind of hidden in plain sight, and you have to have the right tools to be able to see, you know, all the magic that lives in the everyday world. But I'm excited to hopefully get to see more locations in the second book. And I really hope this is a series where we get to follow Amari from the time she's currently 12 until she's a young adult. I'm really interested to see where the series goes. And I believe the second book comes out sometime this month. One of my goals this year is to read 6 nonfiction books, and I got started with that by reading The Pain Gap by Anna Shea Hussein, which ended up being a 5-star read for me. I found the book very informative and just insightful. It was very interesting and intriguing to read. I don't know how many more I words I can fit right there. This is a nonfiction book that talks a lot about how sexism and racism affect the healthcare women receive, and how a lot more women die than they necessarily need to from preventable causes because of sexism and racism in healthcare. I thought this was a really good book. I thought it was really pretty intersectional. The book did talk a little bit about white feminism, or like white women, but it did also discuss how, you know, racism plays just as big of a role in healthcare, and I thought it was really interesting. The book discussed the maternal mortality rate and how, you know, the US has the highest maternal mortality rate of the developed countries. It discussed COVID and how early COVID affected people, especially women dealing with domestic abuse. And then it discussed how COVID vaccines, whenever they were rolled out, pregnant women were kind of left on their own to pick, you know, whether or not they were going to take the vaccine, because, you know, there was never like any super clear guidance in the beginning. And just, I really enjoyed the way it touched on all of those points. I thought it was incredibly interesting. I already knew some stuff, such as the maternal mortality rate, because I remember learning that during one of my college classes. And that particular fact actually really scared me whenever I was pregnant with Rowan, but also, like, between then and now, just reinforcing that I had a lot of privilege and luck on my side with my pregnancy with Rowan. The book was incredibly interesting though, very insightful, and I think definitely if you get a chance to read it, you should. The book didn't only just include, you know, statistics in Anna Shea's own writing and her own experiences. It also included excerpts from other people's stories and other people's experiences. I really hope you get around to reading it if you can. I also read Verity by Colleen Hoover, and I rated it 4 stars. I read this as a buddy read with Michaela at ReedMyLife. I will have her Instagram and YouTube linked in the description box. And this was also another book that was part of the 12 Books by 12 Friends challenge. This book follows Lowen. She is offered the opportunity to ghostwrite, essentially, a book by 3 books by Verity Crawford, because Verity Crawford has recently been injured and is no longer able to finish her series. Along the way, Lowen learns that Verity's lost 2 of her children recently. While going through Verity's office to learn more about Verity and her books and find notes on the next couple of books, Lowen also accidentally comes across a manuscript of a memoir Verity's written, and while going through the manuscript, Lowen is kind of horrified by all the stuff she learns about Verity. And also along the way, Lowen is kind of dealing with feelings she's developing for Jeremy, her Verity's husband. It is a very dark book, very disturbing at times, but also I couldn't put it down. But some of the stuff that Verity describes in her memoir, especially regarding her 2 oldest daughters, was very disturbing, and I didn't like it, and it made me very uncomfortable. And I do think I might have considered DNFing this if I hadn't been reading it as a buddy read. But because I was reading it as a buddy read, I didn't want to quit. And so I kept going, and ultimately it was a really great book, and I had a great experience with it. And there is this twist at the end that just left me with more and more questions. I finished this book as of today, like the day I'm videoing this, about 4 days ago. And I just keep thinking about all this stuff and all these questions I have now that I finished the book. But I really did enjoy it. I do think I might try to give Colleen Hoover's other books a try at some point this year as well. I also read and loved How We Fall Apart by Katie Zhao, and it was a 4-star book. I read this as part of the January Buzzword Challenge, which was to read a book with either the 5 Ys or an H in the title. and I have that vlogged if you want to check it out. This book follows Nancy. She's a scholarship student at a private school in New York that is full of rich kids. And she has a group with 5 friends, but one of the friends has recently been found murdered, and she and the other 3 people in this group are being framed. Somebody called the proctor is using an app called Tip Tap, which is essentially like Yik Yak, to frame them and blackmail them and release private information about them that they'd wanted kept secret. This book alternates between present day and years in the past to explain how they got to where they are. I had a great time with this book. Nancy wasn't the most likable character, but she wasn't the most unlikable either. She was very interesting in the sense that, you know, you could always tell that she was never 100% a good person, but she was determined to get what she wanted and get what she wanted, I guess. I don't quite know, but I had a great time with this book. I think it might have been a 5-star if the first time I had ever read it, I hadn't stopped and had to restart it a few months later, because I had a lot more questions about the first third this time around, and I noticed myself more critical about certain roles in the book than I'd been whenever I read the first third back last fall. For example, the principal's role in the book was both underwhelming and overwhelming. Like, it felt like, you know, he should have been more involved and less involved, because at the beginning of the book, it seemed like he was trying to play a really heavy-handed role in the investigation. But then by the end of the book, it didn't seem like he was that concerned anymore, if that makes sense. But I had a great time with this book, and I look forward to reading Katie Zhao's next release this year. I also read Only When It's Us by Chloe Leese. KCB Reading on Instagram shared her experience with the series this month. It felt like every couple of days I opened it and she'd read another one of those books in the Bergman Brothers series and was raving about it. And so I went ahead and decided to read it. Only When It's Us follows Willa and Ryder. Willa is a student athlete in college. She plays soccer. She's doing great in soccer. Her goal is to play professionally. She's not doing bad in school, but there is one particular class she's kind of struggling with. Ryder, on the other hand, is hard of hearing or deaf. I'm not sure which would be the most accurate way to describe him. He's kind of still angry about being deaf because he's not someone who was born deaf. When you read the book, you'll learn like what happened to him, because at one point soccer was a huge part of his life as well. Willa and Ryder don't really start interacting until their professor tells Willa to get notes from Ryder because Ryder has all of his notes. And at first, Willa thinks Ryder is just ignoring her, so she's not happy with him. And then she learns that he just can't hear her. And so they kind of go on to develop a bond. They have a lot of banter, and I wouldn't really say they're enemies to lovers. Like, there's definitely like a dislike in the beginning, but I think they warm up to each other pretty quickly. But there's a lot of banter and like kind of going back and forth. Some of their banter and like this one particular scene in the classroom kind of reminded me of Lucy and Josh from The Hating Game. But whereas I didn't really like this particular like stuff with Lucy and Josh as far as pranks and everything goes, I did actually like it and have fun with it with Willa and Ryder. And it might just be because Willa and Ryder are like younger, they're young adults, they're like college students, they're kind of adults, but they're not fully out there yet. And so that's kind of what it reminded me of, or why I think I enjoyed that dynamic better in this book. I enjoyed the way Willa and Ryder got to know each other. They ended up being paired together on a project, and a lot of it really has to do with the fact that their professor is kind of meddlesome, and you kind of find out more about that if you read the book about why he is the way he is. I do kind of wish I had read the summary or like read more about the book before reading it other than just going on hype, because Willa's mom is sick, and that part of the book made me kind of sad. I hadn't been quite expecting it. And so I started the book like being like, oh, okay. And then at some point in the book, it gets worse and I got really sad. So I do kind of wish I had checked for myself before going into it, just because that's a me issue. I will also say that somewhere around the 2/3 and 3/4 mark, I feel like the pace got a little weird. I feel like the pace changed so much from the beginning of the book to that point in the book that it kind of did affect my enjoyment of the end, but overall it was a really great book, and I look forward to reading more of the Bergman Brothers books. I think Ren's book is next, and I think it has more to do with hockey than with soccer. I also read Witches Steeped in Gold by Sienna Smart, and this was a 3.5 star rating for me, which isn't bad, but I didn't love this book. I wanted to love it so much because this was even one of my 5-star predictions. This book follows Jasmine and Irea. Irea is the daughter of the queen that Jasmine's mother overthrew, and now Jasmine and Irea are working together to overthrow Jasmine's mom. There's some more to it, and there's some twists and turns in it, and there's like this big twist at the end about who this one particular person is really going to work with. But I will say that as much as I wanted to love this book, I just didn't. I can't even put my finger on what was wrong or what I didn't like about it. I think I just expected too much without knowing enough about the book prior to reading it, because a lot of what interested me in the book was the title and the cover. I am kind of bummed that wasn't a 5-star read, but 3.5 isn't bad. And I do still plan on continuing the series, so I will probably be rereading this right before I read the next book, which I think comes out sometime this summer. But that way I can refresh my mind, and maybe I'll like it more upon a reread. Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lapina was another 3.5-star read. This book follows 3 adult children in the aftermath of their parents' murder. Their parents were incredibly rich, so naturally, all the kids are suspected of being the murderers. As the book goes on, you learn more and more, like, just bad facts about each of these kids. They've all done bad things. They're all incredibly greedy and spoiled. The parents also, especially the dad, were not good people either. The kids also have an aunt who in the beginning I could not stand. I did not want to read a single thing with her in it. But by the end, I was actually rooting for the aunt. But it was not until the very, very, very end, like last 2 or 3 chapters. Overall, I would say parts of the book were fun, but also I think it was just an incredibly stressful book to me for some reason. I don't know why, but this book stressed me out. Every time I read it, I could only read a chapter or 2 at a time, and then I had to put it down and take a break because it was stressing me out. These kids, which they're adults, but like the kids were such awful people. The idea of them sharing just this enormous amount of money with anyone just sounded like the worst thing in the world to them, even if they had to split the money with 1 or 2 people, it still wouldn't have been that much. And then the Aunt Audrey, she's kind of just, I don't know. I didn't like her in the beginning, and I had a good reason not to like her, and I still didn't really like her by the end, but I was rooting for her. It was a wild ride, but it was a good book, and I had a good time with it. I could never predict who the killer was because every single person who had a POV for the most part seemed like they could have done it. It was really interesting and fun, but just the level of stress it caused me made it a 3.5-star read. Milk Fed by Melissa Broder was a 3-star read. This book follows Rachel. She is a 24-year-old woman she works for some type of PR company, I believe, and she also is in therapy to deal with recovering from an eating disorder and also mommy issues that she kind of has. She and her therapist decide that she's going to do a 90-day detox from communicating with her mom, and during this 90-day period, she meets someone named Miriam who has recently started working at this yogurt shop she goes to every day for lunch. She and Miriam definitely explore like a friendship and a little bit more, but that's not really the focus of the story. I just like mentioning it because I don't know how to mention the book without mentioning it. But like I said, it's not really a focus point of the story. With Miriam, Rachel kind of explores her eating disorder a little bit more and becoming more comfortable and happy with food again, as well as she kind of explores more of being Jewish because Miriam and her family are still practicing Jews, whereas Rachel grew up Jewish, but she hasn't really practiced as an adult. There were a couple of things that made me a little uncomfortable with the book. First, Rachel, you know, she's recovering from an eating disorder. She's had body issues her entire life. It talks about when she was a kid, her grandparents would just take her out to eat like once every couple of weeks, and they'd just spend all day eating and doing stuff together. And as a child, her mom was very controlling about her food and her weight, and as a teenager she actually developed anorexia, and the only reason her mother even sought treatment is because she'd gotten to the point where her period had stopped. And then as an adult, she still has eating disordered habits, but she's, I'm assuming, maintaining a low but healthy weight. I'm not quite sure. Rachel also has these incredibly strict food rituals, and the book also doesn't shy away from describing her food rituals and calories and stuff. So I definitely say if you have like any eating disordered eating history or something, maybe check out more trigger warnings on this book beforehand, because those parts of the book were a little uncomfortable. Rachel also has pretty severe mommy issues, and I kind of feel bad saying that, but I don't really know how else to describe it. She talks about, you know, when she was like a teenager, having sexual fantasies about her friends' moms, but like not sexual as in having sex, sexual as in like breastfeeding, but in a sexual way, because I don't know, she was older or something, I'm not quite sure. And she's even had like sexual fantasies related to this older woman at work who she also kind of sees as a mother figure that she wants approval from. It was just, those parts of the book were very disturbing and uncomfortable to read, and the book didn't shy away from the uncomfortable stuff. But in the end, I would say the book made me very uncomfortable, but at the same time, I couldn't put it down. So while I don't know that I like it, I obviously was interested and kept reading, so that's how it ended up as a 3-star read. I also reread the first Twilight book by Stephanie Meyer, and I'm gonna go ahead and rate it 3 stars. I would say it gets a star for nostalgia because I had so much fun rereading this. There were so many things about the book I'd forgotten, and I had a great time rereading it. But at the same time, I caught and picked up on a lot more issues than I did the first time I read it. Like, Edward is just a walking red flag. I started off annotating it, and then somewhere along the way I quit. I also just so happened to watch the first 2 movies earlier this month. So overall, it was a great time. I had fun with it. The final book I read in January was Twice Shy by Sarah Hogle, and it was a 2-star read, which was kind of disappointing because I absolutely loved You Deserve Each Other. Twice Shy follows Mabel Parrish, and she's worked for a resort her entire adult life. She spent years doing housekeeping, and she's recently kind of gotten a pity promotion to event coordinator, but she's never really gotten to coordinate any events. All of her ideas keep getting shot down, and she keeps somehow getting relegated back to doing housekeeping, even though it's not her job. She daydreams about telling everyone off and moving on with her life, but she just can't do it. And then one day, someone shows up and tells her that she's inherited this house from her great aunt, who she hasn't seen since she was a child, and she kind of sneakily quits work and she goes to the house only to find out that she has co-inherited it with the groundskeeper named Wesley, who was with her aunt in her later years. When she first meets Wesley, they kind of get off on the wrong foot, and it turns out though most of that's just because Wesley's incredibly shy and uncomfortable around new people. At first, Wesley and Mabel butt heads about what they're going to do, how they're going to take care of the house, what they're going to do with it, and they ultimately reach an agreement. And along the way, they develop feelings, and it should be sweet and fun and romantic, right? Except I wasn't really able to experience that because so much other stuff about the book bothered me. The first couple of fantasies or daydreams Mabel experienced were kind of fun, but as the book got on, they became less fun and just felt unhealthy, and I just didn't like them. Mabel would daydream about this coffee shop that was just this perfect coffee shop that she would own, but the main person who would visit her coffee shop was someone who happened to look just like Wesley because Mabel had been catfished before the book started. Mabel was also incredibly passive, to the point that even whenever she got the chance to do things that should have been satisfying and shown character growth, they weren't. They were underwhelming. I think maybe I would have enjoyed the book a tiny bit more if maybe we'd had Wesley's point of view as well, because I really enjoyed Wesley. I wanted to get to know him more, and so I kind of wish we'd gotten to be inside his head too, instead of just Mabel's, and maybe that could have improved some stuff. Maybe it would have helped with, like, you know, I don't know what it would have helped with. I just wish it was there. Those are all the books I read in January. Like I said, it was a pretty good reading month. Please let me know how your reading month was, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I'll talk to you later. Bye.